As we grow older, we're going to have to face a very important decision that we have an aging body and an aging mind. And we're going to have to either choose to take care of those things by eating healthier, exercising, and doing mental gymnastics of sorts, or we choose not to. The good news, if you choose not to, you're probably going to live as long as everybody else, or almost as long. But the bad news is, if you choose not to, even though you're going to live almost as long, your life is probably going to suck more.
Are you ready to make the most of the only life you have? To make smart money choices focused on achieving what you care about most? Here to help you balance living well today without sacrificing your tomorrow is the Retirement Answer Man, Roger Whitney.
Well, when I'm sitting in an office with a client at a conference table, or if we're on a video call, and we're talking about what potential risks do we have to their retirement and to their life, we're dealing with the election, we're dealing with inflation, premature death, markets and portfolio risk, all those types of things. And they're all extremely important and things that we need to deal with. But once you peel all those away and you start getting a little bit deeper, the biggest fear people have is losing their mind. Not being able to be who they are right now. You know, with something as terrible as cancer, there's still this feeling that you can fight it in some way or control your response to it. I have known people that have had cancer that still lived a big life. But with dementia, there's this fear of not just losing your mind, but losing who you are and your life. That's pretty scary. Now, if you're still with me, this is not a doom and gloom episode about dementia. We're going to talk about dementia. We're going to talk about what it is, some statistics about it, and then we're going to have a guest on about one of those proactive steps that you can take to help skew the odds in your favor. Now, when you look at dementia, the greatest risk factor is age, according to the Alzheimer's Association. Now, we can't control that one, right? But there are a number of other things that we can control if we make the decision to that we're going to talk about today. So there is hope. Don't get depressed. We're talking about how do we intentionally work towards an amazing life and an amazing retirement. And if we want to do that, we got to deal with this stuff. Just like we got to deal with that all-important disclaimer. That's right, Roger. We got to deal with that all-important disclaimer. Well, hey, wait, I'm Roger. I'm not going to talk to myself. Here's the disclaimer. Don't take advice from me on this podcast. Not smart. Not smart. I don't know anything about you. You don't know anything about me. I have a rule. I only give advice to people that I work for and walk life with as a fiduciary and as a client because I know a lot about them. Now, if you want someone to walk life with you and you want to talk to me about that, go to rogerwhitney.com and we can set up a time to talk about that. But until that time, think of this as helpful hints in education and make sure you consult your legal advisor, your tax advisor, and your financial advisor before you make any decisions because that's just common sense. Now we got that out of the way. Let's figure out what is this dementia thing that's such a big risk in our life.
Huh? What does that mean?
So we're going to talk about this huge, scary risk of dementia. It's probably a good idea that we have at least some understanding of what it is we're talking about, right? So what is dementia? Well, in very general terms, according to the Alzheimer's Association, dementia is the loss of memory and other mental abilities severe enough to interfere with daily life. Now, we all have, I don't know if it's some form of dementia, but I could not think of one of my son's best friends who I had to send a text to the other day. I'm like, I can't remember his name. And I was sitting there racking my brain. How can I not remember his name? Or my wife telling me to do something and I totally forgot what she said right after she said it. Now, that's just a memory lapse, right? But that doesn't change my daily life. Dementia can change your daily life. And it's caused by a physical change in the brain that happens over time and is degenerative. So it gets worse typically as it gets older. And again, I'm not an expert in this subject. I just know it from the little research I've done and walking life with people where I've seen this stuff happen. So what are some of the symptoms of dementia? Well, you have difficulty remembering recent conversations, like my wife telling me something to do. Names, like my buddy's friend or my son's friend. Events is often an early clinical symptom. Now, I guess you could say I have these early clinical symptoms. Obviously, that's not the case, but those are where they start. And that's a little bit of the scary part when we think of dementia, because it starts off with, I forgot the name. I forgot that. Where were we going? All these little things that we forget and we just laugh about, or we just, brush off as nothing. But then they get a little bit worse and they get a little bit more worse. And generally, it's not the person that's having them that realizes it as much as someone that's interacting with them. And I've been in those situations. It's a little uncomfortable because you don't know where that line is, and it's not the easiest topic to bring up. So dementia is this umbrella of this type of disease. There are different forms of dementia. The top one being Alzheimer's disease, which is the one that we hear about all the time, the Alzheimer's Association, which I'll have links to that has some great information. There's vascular dementia. There's dementia with Lewy bodies, DLB. Those are the top three, but also thrown in there is Huntington's disease and all these other ones that I can't even pronounce. So there are lots of different forms of dementia, but we're basically talking about a degenerative ability of the mind over time. So how important is this to understand, and how big of a risk is this to you and I as we grow older? Well, let's look at the hot topic segment and at some facts about dementia. Well, in the news today, dementia and Alzheimer's is a big risk as we get older, and it sucks and it's not getting any better. Okay, that may not be the headline in the news, but it should be. That's a good headline. I'm a good headline writer, I guess. Okay, what are we talking about when dementia? How big of risk is this? And these are facts according to the Alzheimer's Association. According to them, the AA, I guess we'll call it, they have 1 in 3 people die with ALS or some form of dementia. So 1 in 3 elderly people die with some form of dementia. Officially, dementia is listed as the 5th leading cause of death. I did not know that. That's pretty high. About 5.4 million people in the United States have ALS, not just dementia, ALS. And about 5.2 million of those people are over the age of 65. So it's definitely an older person's battle and risk. If you're over the age of 55, about 1 in 9 people have some form of dementia. And they estimate that by the year 2050, which a lot of you and I are going to be around for, they estimate that it's going to go from 5.4 million to 13.8 million. So this is a huge issue when age is the biggest risk factor. So great. We can't control how we get older. It's just happening. It just happened. I just got older. It just happened again. It just happened again. Okay, I'll stop. I promise. We can't change that, right? But what action steps can we take? Well, in our practical planning segment, I brought on an expert dietitian to talk about the nutritional aspect of it and how that can help skew the odds in their favor. Now, this isn't the only thing that we can do, but it's a great step. So let's get talking with Maggie Moon. So now that we've defined this huge demon, dementia, that is a big risk as we get older, and the number one risk factor, aging, is something we can't control, what are things that we do have control over to help skew the odds in our favor when it comes to dementia? Well, the good thing is there are a number of things that are actually good for our body, our mind, and our spirit, not just for this one area. And what I want to focus on today is our nutrition, what we can do in our nutrition to fight Alzheimer's and dementia as we get older. So I brought on an expert in this area, Maggie Moon, MSRDN. Now, Maggie is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and author of numerous articles and books. She completed her clinical training at New York Presbyterian Hospital of Columbia and Cornell, holds her master's degree in nutrition and education from Columbia's University Teachers College. She has a BA in English at UC Berkeley. Maggie's a really smart lady. And she did a lot of research with some of the best minds in the country to form a dietary plan. I hate that word diet, but a dietary plan of how we can adjust how we eat to help maintain brain function and mental health. And she just recently, literally like a month ago, came out with the book, The M.I.N.D Diet, a scientific approach to enhancing brain function and helping prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. So let's have a conversation with Maggie Moon to decide or learn how we can take action in our own lives to battle this fear of dementia. Well, welcome to the show, Maggie.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I have your book in front of me, The M.I.N.D Diet, a scientific approach to enhancing brain function and helping prevent Alzheimer's and dementia, which is a big risk. I guess the number one factor is getting older, right? When we can't control that.
You certainly can't control aging, but you can control how well you age and your health and your quality of life as you advance in years.
Now, before we get into some action-oriented steps, can you give me a very simple brain summary of why this is important, why nutrition is an important part of that?
Sure. So as we age-related memory decline happens. It's just a part of normal aging. And sometimes that can advance to dementias and Alzheimer's. And we don't quite know what leads to that, but we think it may be a number of different factors over time, which is why lifestyle factors like diet and exercise and being intellectually stimulated are all linked to brain health over time. And so that's why these heart-healthy diets that keep the whole circulatory system happy and healthy also relate to keeping the brain happy and healthy, because basically you're providing a good supply of blood to the brain.
And it's one of those things that we actually can control, right? What we put in our body.
Exactly. This is a place where people can do something positive for themselves. And it's not only good for your brain, but it's good for your heart, and it's good for your waistline, and it's good for, diabetes management. So it's good for any of a number of things. This diet happens to be optimized for brain health as well.
Okay, so let's talk about what is the M.I.N.D diet?
The M.I.N.D diet, it's actually an acronym.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's a big, long acronym. The M alone stands for Mediterranean and DASH, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension. So stay with me. That's the M alone. So it's the M.I.N.D dash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay.
Okay, I'm with you.
So that's the M.I.N.D diet. But basically, the simpler way to think about it is the M.I.N.D diet is a blend of two well-proven heart-healthy diets, the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet.
Okay, so can you tell me what those are real briefly?
Sure. The Mediterranean diet is a cultural diet based on the ways of eating from around that area in Europe, and it's very heavy in olive oil and fish and vegetables and whole grains. Very plant-based. And the DASH diet, Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension, was a clinically designed diet to reduce blood pressure. It's heart healthy. It's also very heavy in fruits and vegetables, poultry. It's got a heavier emphasis on dairy. And so these two diets together are designed for heart health. The M.I.N.D diet is a blend of these two diets that's been optimized for the research that specifically talks about the foods that are good for brain health.
Okay, so what are some of the science behind that? How do you optimize something like that?
So there's been research on certain foods as well as certain nutrients. So, for example, there's been research done on specific foods like blueberries and strawberries, as well as fatty fish. But there's also been research on polyphenols and some of these plant compounds. So they go both ways. And so what they've found is that both Mediterranean and DASH and these certain foods like berries and fish, they come together to provide all the nutrients that we think that the brain needs to stay healthy over time.
I'm curious, how did you start this journey? You're a young lady, right?
Thank you.
So well, everybody's getting, I'm able to say that to more and more people. It's a little scary.
It happens over time.
It does, yeah. But how did you get into focusing your research on this?
That's an important point. This is not my research, but as a dietitian, it's something that I'm passionate about translating into something that's easy for people to follow. So this research is actually done out of Rush University Medical Center in Chicago.
Okay.
And it's based on data that's like 20 years worth of data. And what happened was in 2015, two really big studies came out that summarized these decades worth of data. And so it's been an amazing finding that we've all been really interested about in the nutrition community in 2016. And so it's new, but it's got a very solid foundation. So it's got that combination of being both exciting as well as very sound at the same time. And to me, as an evidence-based practitioner, that's very exciting to me. I feel very comfortable with all these recommendations, and I'm excited by the remarkable results it's had for brain health.
So when I look at the cover of your book, and then I look in the book, there's two things I really like about it.
I think I know at least one of what you're going to say.
Oh, you already know that. I love that it has a glass of red wine on the front of the book.
Yes.
So you already know me so well.
I had a feeling.
In these few minutes. And then what I also like is that you have some of the science in there, but my wife and I are trying to do this, and it's like, just tell me what to cook, right? Mm-hmm. Show me exactly what to eat. And you do that a lot in the book with recipes and the tips. So can you give me some ideas of what is it that people will be eating to execute the M.I.N.D diet?
Well, that's the most exciting part to me, is that the M.I.N D diet is based on these 10 foods that you want to eat and these 5 types of food that you want to avoid, and that they're so simple and you can make so many great meals out of it. So I'll just run down the list real quick and then maybe give a couple ideas.
Perfect.
So the 10 foods that people should be focusing their entire diet around: whole grains, vegetables in general, leafy greens in particular, nuts, beans, berries, poultry, fish, olive oil, and of course that glass of wine that we all love. So as you can imagine, there are so many different ways to do this. I mean, for example, nuts, they say to have nuts about 5 times a week. And so if you have a regular job, Monday through Friday, that's as simple as just packing nuts for every day of the week. Berries twice a week. I love to throw fresh berries into breakfast, steel-cut oatmeal topped with those berries a couple days in a row, because berries are perishable. So I do want to eat them, within a couple days. Frozen is also a great option when it comes to that. Something like a roast chicken with rosemary and lemon, or, salmon, which is nice and fatty. So it's very forgiving, even for the novice chef. These are things that are so delicious and so simple and so good for you. And so one of the things that I'm excited about is that there are 75 recipes in the book, and they've been contributed by myself, as well as some of the boards like the Whole Grain Council and the Blueberry Council, as well as a number of culinary-minded dietitians. So You know that these recipes are going to be delicious, but also that they're going to be healthy, and they all adhere to the M.I.N.D diet criteria.
Now, the one thing missing on these 75 recipes, each one doesn't say, and a glass of wine.
Yes.
I'm just going to write that into my copy here.
Yes, the glass of wine is a given, but you're right. That would have been a helpful tip.
That would have
for those who forget, glass of wine.
That's right. Now, 2 things real quick. One is, can you tell me what a whole grain is? Like, I just bought some steel cut grain. I don't even know what that means. I was told I was supposed to. What is whole grain, and why is that different than any other kind of grain?
So a grain in general, it's got 3 parts. It's got the bran on the outside. That's where all the fiber is. It's got the germ, which is a little small bit of the grain, and that's where the little bit of fatty acids are, as well as all the vitamins and minerals. And then most of the rest of it is the endosperm, and that's where all the starch is. Okay. So that's what a whole grain is. And a lot of what's on the market is not a whole grain. So maybe the bran and the germ has been removed, and that's what you get when you have a refined grain.
And someone explained to me once is that what they do is they basically take, I guess it's the starchy part, to make a paste, and then they just add flavors to paste.
Yes, that's quite often what happens. You're just basically using a white flour, but it's basically just that starchy endosperm. You've lost all the fiber, you've lost all the essential fats, and you've lost all the vitamins and minerals. So what you're left with is basically carbohydrate alone.
Okay. And then one thing, when I heard you list the foods, and it's sort of gone to my very simplistic mantra, is like, like with investing, use investments, not investment product. And what I heard you say is use food, not food product. And then your diet is really just what portions of what types of foods to use. I didn't hear any products in the list that you gave.
Right. The more whole food that you can use, the better it will be in terms of following this diet. There are some convenience products. You can find some canned beans to cut down on time. You can find, some whole grains that maybe have been made into a pasta, which is a little bit processed, but not too much. So there are some shortcuts that way, but for the most part, these are very whole foods that you could almost see them, growing in orchards or fields,
Okay.
or in the ocean when it comes to the fish.
Now, I see two problems with trying to implement something like this that we all fall into. The first is the serving size. It's so hard to know what a serving size is. Can you talk to us a little bit about serving sizes and why that's important, and maybe some tips of how to understand those?
Sure. For the most part, I think of serving sizes as about a half a cup of whatever it is. And then there are exceptions to that, of course. But that's kind of an easy rule of thumb. But the thing is that with the Mind diet, it's not really about how many servings as it is, just how many times a week that you have it. And then, as you have it, you will most likely have a serving. So when it comes to whole grains, that's about a half cup cooked. Most people have more, which is fine. For vegetables, it's, either a half cup of vegetables, or when it comes to leafy greens, it's 1 cup. And that makes sense because leafy greens have so much air in them and they're so light. And so you just imagine that in order to get to that same density of a broccoli, you would need to get a cup. So that's one exception. And then nuts, because they're so concentrated, actually a serving is more like a handful or an ounce versus that half cup.
And then now, to do something like this, and I'm actually working on this right now, is planning it out, because it's so hard to do meal planning. And when I don't do it, which is all the time, I end up hungry and then I just grab whatever I can grab. Any tips on how we can make meal planning less daunting?
Yes. The number one easiest way to work on meal planning is to work with a coach until you get the hang of it. I know not everyone can do that, but if you can find a registered dietitian who does meal planning to help you out, to kind of guide you through it for the first few weeks that you do it, that's fantastic. But now, if you're doing it on your own, and there are worksheets in my book, so that's another way to do it. But I really think about, especially for this diet, what are the things I need to get to every day? And so every day you need to get to vegetables, you need to get to whole grains, and you need to get to leafy greens. So the first things I think about are, how am I going to populate those foods? And so let's just take whole grains, for example. Oatmeal for me is really easy. I can make a batch of oatmeal and eat it all week long. And so for me, it's okay to have the same thing every day for breakfast, and I can change the toppings. So that's automatically super easy, done. Or if I make a big batch of brown rice or barley or quinoa, and I make it for dinner, I make sure that I make enough for the next day's lunch. And then I've got 2 meals taken care of right there. And so it's a bit of efficiency. Thinking about those efficiencies as you meal plan is one way to make it easy. And I will just say that, since I did use whole grains as an example, whole grains tend to freeze really well, or grains in general, they freeze very well. And so making an extra batch and putting it in a serving sized container and just putting it in the freezer, and then you can just reconstitute that with a little bit of water and put it in the oven or put it in your microwave, whatever is easier for you. These are all great shortcuts to make the rest of your week efficient.
So a lot of it is batching and doing it to where you pre-plan and have it ready.
Exactly.
Which is, now this gets to the next thing, and this may not be most people, but like today, I'm going to make, actually tonight, after we're done talking, I'm going to attempt to make my first protein bars on my own. I found a recipe, and it's got dried fruit, and that's why I had to get the steel cut grain and other things. But I'm not a cook. I don't naturally know cups and everything else, and it's not difficult whenever I try it. But the kitchen is intimidating to a lot more people than it used to be, too, because less people are cooking at home. So, were you that way? I know you were a professional dancer, so you were really busy. Were you always comfortable in the kitchen?
No, not necessarily. I'm getting more comfortable now. I'm actually in culinary school, and so getting very comfortable in the kitchen. I do think that cooking is an amazing basic skill to have, and I would encourage anyone to try to expand their expertise there, because you just have so much more control over what you're putting in your body. But for those who can't, there are so many meal prep companies out there now, and some of them have a healthier bent to them as well. And so that's one way to kind of have some training wheels in the kitchen where someone's done all your mise en place for you. They've measured out all your ingredients. They've given you exactly what you need. So that's another way to make it simple. There's also so many simple recipes that only take 1 or 2 ingredients. So that's another way to make it a little easier in the kitchen.
Okay, well, I'm going to work on some of these 75 recipes and wine, and I'm going to let you know how they go. And
Please do.
But this book came into my life at a great time because my wife and I are thinking about this stuff right now in terms of cooking more and planning more. So thank you so much for that. How do people find more about your book? Because it just came out.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So it's definitely available online at Amazon and everywhere they sell books. I actually have a website dedicated to the book. It's called minddietmeals.com. And this is an area where, as I continue to develop recipes, not just the ones from the book, sometimes the ones from the book, but beyond that, for the months ahead, I'm going to be posting tips, healthy living ideas, as well as recipes, all at Mind Diet Meals. And for anyone who wants to kind of follow along the process, I am at Mind Diet Meals on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Maggie.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to create a happier life. I heard a quote the other day that just makes sense, and we totally forget about it. You create a happy life or a great life one day at a time. It's so easy to not think about today, to think about, I'm going to be happy later on. I'm going to be happy then. Right now, I'm struggling with this, that, or the other thing, and we forget that a great life is built one day at a time, and so is a happy life. Now, I had a personal experience about this, and I'm proud of myself, so I'm going to brag a little bit. The other day, I was flying to Houston to meet with actually a listener of the show, and along with another client or so. And so I was flying to Houston early in the morning and flying back late that night. So big day. That's a big, man, I don't like those kind of trips. Anyway, my flight left at 7, and I was getting ready to leave, and I couldn't find my car keys. Couldn't find them anywhere. I searched. It took me maybe 25 minutes to find my car keys. Now, the old Roger would be spewing out words I could never repeat on this show without giving it an explicit rating, and would have been stomping around. My blood pressure would have been through the roof, and I would have just probably been a horrible guy the rest of the day. But I was proud of myself because I was pretty chill about it. I finally found the keys, but the whole time I was looking for them, I was like, you know what? If it doesn't happen, I got to reschedule the trip. C'est la vie. Now, that is so unlike those of you that knew me 15 years ago or so would say, what? Really? But I think that's a sign of making a great life. Things are all bad are always going to happen. So my suggestion to you is concentrate on making a great day today, because that's the only way you're going to create a great life tomorrow and all the days of your life.
On your marks, get set.
Welcome to the Smart Sprint segment, where I'm going to challenge you to take a proactive step in your life to help create that great retirement that you're looking for and that great life you're looking for. And I know you are. I'm going to challenge you in the next 7 days to keep a food log of everything you eat throughout the day. Just track what you eat. I've done this before, and it is very mind-opening. Really? I put that much? I put that in my mouth? You are what you eat. I know it sounds cliche. So I challenge you in the next 7 days, track what you eat. And whether you get Maggie's book, The Mind Diet, and I'll have a link to that in the show, or some other book to help you build a better nutritional plan so you can feed the engine, your body, so you can have the most impact in the world that you want. Hey, I want to thank you so much for joining me today on the Retirement Answer Man podcast. I think this is really important. If you get overwhelmed with all the things that you need to do as you're walking this journey towards a great retirement, I encourage you to reach out to someone that can either speak into your life and help create a roadmap for you, or an advisor that can come alongside you that has walked that journey many times before. And I would be honored if you consider me to do that. This is what I do for a living, and I think beyond simply the finances. It's about holistic planning and being intentional and having the right little conversation. So if you have an interest and you're feeling overwhelmed, go to rogerwhitney.com and click on Work with Roger, and we can set up a time to talk about that. Again, I enjoy this time every week I get to spend with you, and thank you so much for listening. This is Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.